Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to talk about some very odd financial decisions being made by Disney and Marvel Studios specifically. Now, I'm going to go over this, and it's either incredibly dumb or they're banking on something weird. Because look, the upcoming slate of Marvel films, and when I say that I mean films, not the Disney Plus shows. That's completely off there. I'm just talking about theatrically released films or films that they plan to release theatrically. Um, there's going to be four Marvel films coming out in 2021 at this point, and there are five Marvel films slated to come out in 2022. Now, this is completely insane. Uh, here's my problem with this. We've gotten to the point now where we've gotten three Marvel films a year for a few years. Obviously, this year being excluded from that for obvious reasons. But the two previous years from that, we had three Marvel films in each one of those years. So audiences had kind of gotten accustomed to getting those three films, even though most of us probably thought three is plenty. That's probably too much. I think everybody was kind of happy with two Marvel films a year. But now, with the way that they seem to be churning this stuff out, and with the obvious problems they've had with their release schedule, because they are still trying to hold on to stuff like Black Widow for a theatrical release, and I'm going to go over that when I start going over these the films that are going to be coming up from Marvel in the near future. And these films are being placed way too close together. They're going to start eating into each other's profits. It's not a smart business decision to move forward with more than three films a year. Even with the three films a year, they still are starting to eat into each other. Again, we saw that when they wanted to put Captain Marvel out at the same time as Avengers Infinity War, Black Panther at the same time as Avengers Infinity War, and then Captain Marvel at the same time as Avengers Endgame. And both of those films, Black Panther and Captain Marvel, both their releases bled into the Avengers films. Not very much, but they did bleed over where Captain Marvel was still playing in theaters when Avengers Endgame came out. The same thing for Black Panther and Infinity War. So inherently that is eating into your profits somehow. If not for one film, then for the other. That's why a lot of studios do not put out similar films at the same time, because they tend to eat into each other's budgets. Or they tend to eat into each other's box office numbers. Now, I'm going to kind of go over this as if you're looking at what we know as a normal box office run, because I don't know exactly what we're going to be seeing in the near future in terms of what a box office run is actually going to look like. An old box office run is roughly 3 months for a large blockbuster film that makes a lot of money, because theaters like to keep them in there as long as they can keep getting butts in the seats. So it can technically actually last longer than that. I think they can have extensions, but generally it's about 3 months. So, like I said, you got to place them at least beyond that 3-month mark if you're going to do that. So it is possible to get three films in a year, depending on how you want to balance that release schedule. But going to four is when you start running into problems, because again, then they're so crammed together that they have to actually eat into each other. And I have a list of the Marvel films in front of me, so I don't forget the damn dates. So we're going to go through the release schedule for the major MCU films for next year and for 2022. And the first one up is Black Widow. That's coming out. They're set to release that on May 7th, 2021. It makes sense. It's the early summer window. It's probably going to be the first blockbuster out. So it does make sense to put it in that type of a time slot, or a release layer, so that way it can kind of run off. So you have May, June, July is kind of the runoff, and then you should be able to get another film in by August. Now, here's where the problem is that now 2 months after that's released, which again, it's probably made a majority of its money, so this isn't eating into budgets as much as you think it is. But Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is set to come out on July 9th, so those films are definitely going to overlap in theaters. Again, assuming we have some kind of a normal release. So those are 100% going to overlap. So Shang-Chi, I mean, again, I don't know how much they're actually going to eat into each other's budgets, but it will be there. Now you jump forward to November, which again is far enough away from July where you don't really have to worry too much about the overlapping release schedules, and that's going to be Eternals, which is coming out on November 5th. So again, that's the biggest jump here, at least for this year, and it does make sense to have it that far forward. However, what I don't agree with is immediately after that, on December 17th, 2021, we have the MCU Spider-Man 3, which is like the multiverse one now and all the crap that's been coming out about that. You are releasing a film 5 weeks after, well, actually, probably, maybe a little bit more, maybe like 6 weeks. 6 weeks after the previous film came out. Those films are going to annihilate each other's box office. Because especially if you, because that's the other thing, you don't necessarily know how audiences are going to react to Eternals. That's kind of an untested property. But if that does really, really well, if it does like a Guardians of the Galaxy thing where it makes a lot of money, it's probably going to keep extending on in theaters even into the Christmas time frame. So if you were going to do that, I think a better option would have been, instead of putting Spider-Man in that year, shift them back again and just simply move Eternals to the December time slot. That way you can also maybe move up the Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings to an August time slot, because that would probably be better for them, again, to get out of the shadow of Black Widow, which just came out in May. So, like I said, you can do it with 3 films, but you can't do it like this. That's just stupid. You released a film the previous month. All right, so now we go into March of 2022, and this is Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which we've said is going to bleed into a whole bunch of other projects. Now, this doesn't exactly necessarily make sense to me a whole lot, because I feel like that Spider-Man movie should be after this, since apparently that has to deal with different universes and shit. Or maybe they're happening concurrently. But that's coming out on March 25th, 2022. So that, again, we're looking at the March opening release, so that's kind of the early blockbuster season. That's kind of like the test bed. That's like after you've gotten through the Oscar bait months and the crappy horror movies and all the post-Christmas releases. After you've gotten through all that shit, then you can start releasing stuff in March that might actually make money. So then you go to Thor: Love and Thunder, which is coming out on May 6th of 2022. Now again, it's 3 months, so it's all right. I kind of get that. Well, actually, it's not really 3 months. It's more like 8.5 weeks, because Multiverse of Madness is not getting released in early March; it's getting released in late March. So March 25th all the way up to May 6th. So again. You're not actually looking at a lot of time there, actually, now that I think about it. You're probably looking more along the lines of about 6 weeks. So that's not a good one either, though they're definitely going to eat into each other's budgets. And again, that's not good for anybody on this. Like, again, this is why you don't jam-pack films into years like this. Now you have Black Panther 2, which that might be up in the air to an extent, July 8th, 2022. Now, again, we have this situation where you just had a film released in May. You have another film that's getting released in July, almost exactly 2 months later. Those films are going to bleed into each other a little bit. But now you have, again, that big jump, because really the August, September, and October time periods for blockbuster films, they really don't get released a lot in there. Maybe in August. August is probably the highest month that I can think of, but they very rarely go past Labor Day in terms of those big releases before you hit that gap that kind of picks up again after Halloween, when the holiday season starts to kick in a bit more. But now you have November 11th, which is Captain Marvel 2. And this is, again, at least there's a gap. At least there's somewhat of a gap. So Black Panther 2 and Captain Marvel 2 shouldn't eat too much into each other's budgets. But again, now you have this, you also have this whole thing where there is a mystery film, an unnamed film that is jam-packed right in the middle there, and again, this is where we have this recurring problem with Marvel. Is this weird, stupid thing that they like to do, where they basically just decide, okay, we're just gonna. The idea of not being able to do basic math. That's really the problem here. Is the idea like, oh, we made one Marvel movie and it made $1 billion. What if we make 2 in a year and then they get two, and then two of them make $1 billion, and then they do it three, and in 2019, all three of their Marvel films grossed over $1 billion. Although that Spider-Man one definitely got pushed over the finish line quite a bit. And the idea is like, okay, now we can do it with 4 and 5. It's like, no. Once you start getting into that type of an idea, you're just damaging your business. It's a bad business decision. That's why a lot of movies like that, especially series films, don't release in the same year. That was almost unheard of until the MCU started doing that in 2014. Very rarely did you see a movie and a sequel or an offshoot or something in the same franchise releasing in the same year. The only one that I can really kind of think of in recent memory might be the last two Matrix films. I believe were both released in 2003, although I believe they were also filmed concurrently. So back to what I was saying before, is we have this unnamed Marvel movie that's getting released on October 7th. Of 2022, in between Captain Marvel 2 and Black Panther 2. So now you have royally fucked that nice little gap I was talking about earlier, because now you're going to be eating, not only are both of those films, you're going to be basically screwing 3 movies, because Black Panther 2 is going to have its budget eaten into a little bit by that unnamed Marvel film, and then November comes along only a month later, a little bit over 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks later. And it comes in, and now you're eating so much into Captain Marvel 2's budget, which box office, which again, I have my own theories about how that movie was going to do before the whole pandemic thing shut a bunch of crap down. So I didn't think it was going to make the money of the first one anyway. So that might be a bad one. That one may lose money. Depending on how good that unnamed film is going to be October 7th. And there's also a bunch of speculation about what that film is going to be. They're saying it could be Ant-Man 3, it might be the Blade Project, the new one, the rebooted one. People are thinking maybe Deadpool 3, or Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 or something like that. Which I could see kind of maybe any of those being juggled in there. I don't think it really matters. I think it more matters the fact that this release date schedule is stupid. Like, there's a reason why people don't do this in Hollywood. It's because it chews into profits so much. And it's not even like the idea of, you're taking from Peter to give to Paul, in the sense that, you're still paying to go see a movie if you go see Black Panther over Avengers Infinity War, because you're still giving your money to Marvel in some sense, which, yeah, I guess that's kind of the same idea, but at the same time, too, it makes it so that, sometimes people don't want to go to the movies as much, especially these days. That's going to be kind of interesting. People don't want to go to the movies as much, so maybe, hey, we only have enough time, a family or something like that, we only have enough time and money to go see one of these 2 films. So they're only going to see one of the movies. So whereas if you had more of a spacing, then they would probably have enough to go see both of the films individually. Now, I know not necessarily a lot of people fall into that type of a niche, but there's definitely a lot of that out there, and I think that's a problem. And the other thing is, a lot of people don't I might not want to go to the movies right now, period. So hopefully by the time these films actually start coming out, we have everything kind of semi back to normal with the cinema system. But regardless, I just think I saw this release schedule and I'm just like, why in the name of God would anybody in their right mind do this? And I figured I would relay that message. But again, thank you for tuning in. Put your thoughts in the comments below. Anything in relation to how you feel about this, if you feel the same way that I do, if you're excited for any of these projects, or if this is just more proof for you that Disney's inept at what they do. Put your thoughts in the comments below. As usual, I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?